Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Haley of Discourse of a Divine Diva, and today's video is part of my DIY Diva series for making a succulent wall decor piece. I've had this tea light holder for years, but I never get a chance to light the candles, so I thought it'd be fun to change things up. So I had the idea of remixing this item into a fairy-like twinkling faux succulent holder, and now I'm going to show you how to do it. So let's talk about the things that you need. A tea light candle holder. And while you may not be able to find one exactly like this, because like I said, I've had this one for years, I do have links to similar styles below. Bonus points if you can find one while thrifting. Also, you'll need a glue gun. You will need wire cutters. They don't have to be super heavy duty, but the faux succulents I bought did have pretty thick stems. Preserved moss are another filler of your choice. This is just kind of covering up the glass, so if your cups aren't see-through, you may not, need something as specific as this. Also, you'll need faux succulents and ferns. I'm a sucker for options, and I have links to everything I used in the description below. Fairy lights of your choice. Mine are battery operated, warm, clear lights. I also added magnetic butterflies that easily adhere to the metal candle holder. There are tons of color options. I found the current ones that I'm using at Michael's, so you could also pop into your local store and snatch some up. And then bring your imagination to this DIY party. Don't hesitate to change things up and make it your own. Tutorials are just guidelines, but you have to put your personality into it too, because this is for you or whoever you're making it for. So here's a closer look at my tea light holder. Like I said, I've had it for years, and I don't even know how long that is, to be honest with you. I love the look of it and the mirrored leaves. It's had battery operated tea lights in it and real tea lights, and I just didn't usually bother to light them, and so it wasn't really useful, and I wanted to make it actually useful and more decorative for me. So to start, clean out all those glass candle holders. I used an alcohol wipe to get them all shiny, and you may even need to dig out the cooled candle wax with your fingernail. It's not that hard, it pops right off, so just clean them up. I knew I wanted some hanging elements, so I made sure to get the pearl succulents and some ferns to go with the other succulents. The moss comes in little sections that are easy to break up, and I prefer the dark green color. So, gather all your ingredients, and we begin. Now, as I filmed this, I was winging it, so now I have the knowledge of hindsight to talk to you about what I did. The moss is easy to break up in sections, and it already comes in little clumps anyway, but I basically wanted to use it on the bottom and sides to make it look more organic and really fill it in. You just have to start playing with it and see how it fits in the cups, and you can break it up even further if you need to. For the ferns, I needed to cut off the bottom leaves so they would fit better into the small space of the candle holders. So if something you're using has more volume at the bottom, you might need to cut that a bit. Then I played with putting them together in a way that was pleasing to me and hot glued them together. That way they were going to stay exactly like I needed them. And the ferns specifically are really lightweight, so anchoring them to each other just kind of helps them stay together and stay upright in the way that I wanted them to. But remember, do not burn your fingers. I did that a lot. I always do that when I'm using a glue gun. It's a wonder I have fingertips. So, the succulents were really fun. I played around with the different combinations as I made these. Some of them needed to have the stems cut so they were the right height for the cups, and sometimes that meant adding or subtracting height with the moss as well. The moss is really spongy, so it has some height to it when you put something on it, so you may need to get a thinner layer if you need to, or cut the stems of the succulents, whatever you gotta do. Then we can start putting things together. I built this one up from the back to the front by putting moss up around the edges and then moving forward. So each piece gets a dab of the hot glue to anchor it in, and then sometimes I'm anchoring it to each other. And then we're going to poke more moss around the edges to fill it up. And there you go, the first one's all done. Next, I started with the moss again to build up the space for these larger succulents. In some cases, you may have to cut some of the leaves off to make them fit to your liking. With this one, I totally forgot about that, and so you'll see the one I cut off is in the back. You know, I didn't pay attention. In utilizing the pearl succulents, I cut various links off to get the look and fullness I wanted. Then I hot glued those two links to each other to make them heavier so they could stay in the cup. I was just kind of worried about them wanting to come out, but they didn't want to. A dab of hot glue and in they go. Then I used the larger succulents to help anchor them down as well. And then you can build up the moss around the edges for volume and filler if you want or need to. I like that fuller look. Again, playing with the placement was really important, and as I decided on what went with what, I wanted to combine different colors and textures to make it more interesting. It's a bit easier to build up the moss in between anchoring the succulents in. Whew, it's a lot of words. And then poke more moss in around the edges. And I just used the metal stem of another succulent to kind of push it in. So sometimes it was helpful to glue the ferns to a larger succulent so they would all sit the way I wanted. With this larger combo, it was easier to anchor it in first and then fill in the cup with moss all around it to help everything stay in place and stay upright the way I wanted it to. And I really like how this big clump one turned out. Another pearl succulent piece, I glued the strands together and then used the succulent to help keep them down. But there was a snafu and I kind of glued them to the succulent, and then I forgot to show you the finished cup. You'll see it later. And here's another succulent piece with 3 strands. I really like the cascading look of these and the texture. They're so fun to me. I glued all 3 to each other and anchored them into the cup first. Then I added moss underneath that gives them a little more volume and helps fill in the space like I talked about. Then I anchored in my other succulents with a dab of hot glue, and ta-da! Another cup is done. We're almost finished. For this one, I started from the back again with a wall of moss and built it up from the back to the front. It's really simple and quick with this one. And again, moss first. I played with the placement of the succulents together to make sure they fit well, and then anchored them in with a bit of hot glue and filled them in with moss. Doing the cups took about an hour, so this is a rather quick project if you like more instant gratification in your DIY endeavors. It was actually pretty quick. I put on some music and sang at the top of my lungs and put these together. So here's another look at the finished succulent cups and their variety. I think it's usually best to decorate in odd numbers, so I made sure I had specifically 3 with the hanging succulents because those will be more noticeable. Here it is with all the cups in place on the wall, which is fine, but it was still missing something. So I wound the string of fairy lights around the whole thing. The lights are on a copper wire, which makes wrapping them pretty easy. The lights are battery operated, so the battery pack sits on the mantle underneath, and I can turn it on with a little remote, which is so much more helpful than the tea lights. Then I added the magnetic butterflies for some extra playfulness, and I think they add this idea of movement and of course extra color. And I just love the finished product. It makes me so much happier to look at it now, and it still provides nice soft lighting. So I hope you enjoyed my first DIY tutorial video. This has been really fun to make. I didn't know how it was going to turn out. If you make your own version of this, I would love to see it. So email me, message me, leave a comment, whatever it is. But I hope you have fun creating, and stay sparkly, y'all.